Alright, I am back with another video, and today we're doing a bonus episode of the Deity Build series. For those of you that don't know, the Deity Build series is basically a series that is done with the community, with the fact that we kind of theorycraft and come up with the builds over on a live stream that I then turn into videos. I ran out of builds and forgot to do another live stream to get some more, so you're getting a bonus episode today, featuring a deity that is not actually present in BG3 in any real way, shape or form, however is one that has been highly requested. And since I've done builds for Thor, Odin and Tyr at this point, it only made sense to round off the quartet with Odin, allowing you to run this as a full party build if you so choose, with those other builds of course. So, Odin is kind of interesting. The Forgotten Realms variant is very similar to the original Norse mythology variant, with some slight changes, some abilities here and there, but the lore is pretty much the same. If you know your Norse mythology, you pretty much know what Odin is about. Now, with the Deity Build series, obviously I make chosen of certain characters, but or certain deities even, but it's a bit tricky, because where I've kind of done Tyr, who is kind of the Norse mythology kind of guy, it was a bit hard for me to initially come up with a build to correctly distinguish Odin's chosen from Tyr's. So I had to think for a bit, and I came up with kind of this idea. You see, Odin is known for sacrificing his eye to become basically all-knowing, knowing everything that happens in the past, present, and future. But something always struck me a bit odd about Odin's lore is that yes, he knows all of these things, but he still gathers information. This guy who supposedly knows everything, and maybe I'm just very, not very up to date when it comes to my mythology lore, but he still gets information from things like his ravens or prophecies from Freya, if I'm getting that name correctly. And as such, I thought, well, if Odin does have some sort of small interest in the world of Toril, the Forgotten Lands, maybe even Faerun specifically, then maybe he'd have someone there who would be feeding him information about the goings-on. Because maybe in this kind of what-if tale of Odin in the Forgotten Realms, perhaps while he has knowledge of everything to do with his own plane of existence, maybe he doesn't know everything about the Forgotten Realms, but now knowing that it exists, he wants to know more about it. So he's basically chosen someone to be his aide, to be someone who reports back to him. And in return for reporting back to Odin, this person is given some of Odin's knowledge in the form of memory imprinting, essentially taking Odin's memories of the things he saw when he drank from the well, and is kind of like giving this person those memories. But what it's not just giving them this knowledge. That kind of memory imprinting is causing this person here, this chosen, to kind of confuse their own reality with Odin's, and as such they have kind of unintentionally molded themselves to be more like him. They started fighting with a spear, or in our case a trident, and we'll get to that in a minute. They've started wearing armour, and they've even been able to obtain some of Odin's abilities from the Forgotten Realms lore, such as being able to paralyze enemies just by staring at them, and gaining abilities from a few different classes, which again I'll get into in a minute, because the Forgotten Realms version of Odin has abilities from like clerics, bards, druids, rangers, and wizards, I'm pretty sure, as well as him wielding his usual, spear and all that, and he still has, the two wolves and his steed Sleipnir. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that right. There's a lot of similarities there, but I do think this character would start to kind of get hit, kind of emulate Odin's combat style and his abilities over time. And that's what I've decided to cover with this deity build today. I know that was a really long-winded explanation, but when it comes to characters who have serious mythological backstory, like Odin and the other Norse gods, I try to do my research and get things right. I've probably forgotten a few things, or I've probably misinterpreted some things, because as far as I know, Odin himself cannot actually see the future. He just had the prophecy when he drank the well, and he gains prophecies from other people like Freya, I believe, or Mimir, who he got the permission to drink from the well from, and all that sort of thing. So if I got things wrong, I do apologize, but I did try and make this build, at least in my opinion, a fun build that plays on these aspects of Odin. So Anyways, without further ado, my rambling is now finished. Let's get into the build. Now, the thing is about deity builds that don't have a selectable deity in-game. For clerics, we don't actually need to take a cleric level to get any specific dialogue. However, I actually found that going mostly cleric with this build actually makes the most sense, and I'll get into why in a minute. But like I said, this guy is a knowledge gatherer, an informant for for Odin. So it would make sense to go with one of Odin's domains, which is knowledge, right? Because he has two domains, knowledge and war. And you absolutely could go that route, but I actually think you get less Odin-themed abilities if you go knowledge. So I would actually say, since we're starting as cleric, we should go War Domain. War Domain is going to make us a more effective fighter, which again kind of mimics Odin. Again, this guy is mimicking Odin. He's not actually like Odin himself, so he's not going to be as effective as maybe a full Marshal's fighter, especially in his older age. But War Priest is going to allow us to make additional attacks as a bonus action, up to the number of charges we have per long rest. We start off with 3, but by the end of this we should have about 6. So I believe it's 5 or 6, one of the two. I'll double check at the end. But this basically allows us to be somewhat of a full martial fighter, at least for the most part of the day. But I mainly want to go for cleric for the spell casting here. It does help that War Domain is also going to give us all martial weapons and heavy armor, because that allows us to use pretty much everything we want to in this game. So it's entirely so you can kind of use armor or even clothing. We'll get away to use clothing as well. So it's entirely up to you, but War Domain is Odin's other domain, and I do think it is the best one to get, and you'll see why as we level up the build. As for our cantrips, I've just decided to start off with Produce Flame, Guidance, and Resistance. We're going to get all of the cantrips that would typically be considered useful on a cleric by the end of this build, so feel free to take them in any order you like. I just did kind of want a base damaging cantrip, and I just kind of like Produce Flame more than Sacred Flame. I don't know, that's just me personally. Of course, for the background, we've gone with Sage. It's literally a background about gaining knowledge and getting rewarded for it. Every time you gain knowledge, you gain inspiration. It also comes with Arcana and History skill proficiencies, which make perfect sense for what we're trying to do here. As for the ability scores, now again, I wanted this character to kind of work as a face of the party, but also one who's very good at succeeding multiple skill checks, so I wanted my kind of mental stats, so intelligence, wisdom, and charisma, to be fairly high. Wisdom especially, for obvious reasons. And obviously having constitution at 16 is also going to help with our concentration saving throws, because we're going to have quite a few of those to make. So I ended up dumping strength because we're not actually going to need it with this build, and if I tried to build for strength, I originally tried to do this build with pikes. It didn't really work out, so I've decided to dump strength and dexterity and use the gloves of dexterity to give us an 18 in dex. In my opinion, that just works out better overall. It gives us more freedom to play around with our stats and potential feats as well, which I'll get into later. And yeah, and as for our skill proficiencies, like I said, we have Arcana and History. I've also gone for Religion and Insight, because again, that kind of just makes sense to me. But any of these will really work. We are a human with this build, so we can take an extra skill proficiency, so feel free to grab whatever you think is appropriate. I like Persuasion because I just think it's a great skill for just generally being the face of the party, so I've gone with that. And with that, yeah, that's pretty much everything at the start. I will say, though, a quick question before we really get into this. Obviously, with these, all of my build videos, for the most part, I will go for detailed level up instructions, and that was because I wanted my videos to be as accessible to new players and people as possible. But we're pretty far into the game's lifespan now, and I figured anyone who's still watching build videos at this point probably knows what they're doing. So, do my videos really need to have level by level instructions? If not, and you prefer my other style of content, which is a bit closer to things like the Elemental Nova or the Flaming Speedster, to name a few recent examples, or even my single-class party builds, where I just go over some specific spells and features that you'd want to get, and then the equipment is the more of the focus, let me know. That might be a better way of doing videos in the future. They might not be as long, so let me know if that's something you want to change. But with that little PSA out of the way, or question, I guess, let's get into the rest of the build. Right. There are a couple of multi-classes we can do here. You can take these multi-classes at any particular point, although I would recommend the quick one-level dip that I'm about to show you take as early as you can. It's not like we're gunning for extra attack or anything like that, so it's not going to hurt as much to delay some features by a couple of levels, but as for this next dip, I think you should take this one pretty much right away, and I'm going to suggest Monk. Now, Monk may seem like a weird choice, but again, it does give us access to unarmored defense if we want to go that route, which we absolutely can with our high dex and what will be high wisdom. It'll give us the ability to attack with a bonus action after using a monk weapon. We're only going to take a 1-level dip, so we're only going to be dealing a d4 of damage with our bonus action attacks. But if we were to take something like Polearm Master with this build, which I have made kind of an optional choice that you can do, we'd only be able to do like 1d4 attacks with the butt of our weapon anyway. So it's not really going to make a difference if we go for a Polearm Master bonus attack or a Monk bonus attack. So saving ourselves a feat, we might as well take a 1-level dip of Monk and kind of get a similar thing. I'm sure people will be sure to point out why I'm wrong and how Polearm Master is superior than this, but we also want to take Monk levels for another reason. And that is Monk weapons, because Monk weapons are going to allow us to use any weapon that is not two-handed or heavy with our dexterity, and this gives us access to using spears and tridents without needing to level strength, which is actually super important for this build, because again, I tried to originally make this build work with pikes because that kind of made more sense to me, since the spear options in this game are very limited, and I just couldn't really make it work stat-wise in a way that I was satisfied with, especially when we're only going to be getting 2 feats with this build. So taking a dip into Monk just makes a ton of sense, even a 1-level dip just to make all of our weapons that we want to use for this build use dex, and also getting some of the extra little bonuses that can come with a 1-level dip into Monk. You even get Flurry of Blows, like, to use twice. I mean, it says it has a -1 modifier, but that's because we haven't put on the Gloves of Dex yet, so you could technically get a couple of Flurry of Blows out of this too, for a little bit of extra damage every so often, so I think a 1-level dip of Monk is absolutely going to be worth it, so we're going to take it here. All we're missing out on by taking the little dip into Monk is Cleric level 10, which we don't really need on this build, so I'm not too worried about it. Anyways, leaving Monk now, I'm going to show off the other multi-class of this build. You can take this at any point you like. It's not really going to affect the build overall, but it is going to give us some utility that is quite nice to have. And we're going with Wizard. As I've already said, Odin had the capabilities of a wizard, and I do feel like, again, this person who is a knowledge seeker of like arcane lore and such like that would definitely want to, that reports back to Odin on these sorts of things, would definitely want to have some wizard-like abilities, again, pulling that from Odin, and also this would give you the ability to level scrolls, so if you wanted to find a way to boost your intelligence with this build, say the Warped Headband of Intellect, you absolutely could, and maybe use some spell save DC boosting gear to basically be able to use wizard and cleric spells pretty interchangeably. But I'm only here for some utility spells and one specific subclass. You probably already know what it is, but, you know, humour me for a moment. With level 1 of Wizard, we're going to get to pick 3 cantrips. Again, since I'm not going to try and boost our intelligence higher than 14 with this build, I'm just going to go for some utility options, namely Friends, Mage Hand, and Minor Illusion. This all feels pretty on theme for Odin, at least in my opinion, so it makes sense to me to grab these ones, and again, they're just utility. Speaking of utility, we get to get some pretty fun spells here. The main one I want to grab, though, is Disguise Self. Odin is known to be able to basically change his shape or form into anything he likes. And while I decided not to go for like Wild Shape Druid with this build, you absolutely could if you wanted to, but I decided to pick up this sort of thing in different ways. Disguise Self is going to allow us to magically alter our appearance to any of the other races, basically like the default kind of custom characters for each race, and that felt on theme for an Odin build, being able to like disguise himself so he can move about a bit more freely. I don't know, I just felt like it was too thematic not to pick up. Speaking of too thematic not to pick up, Find Familiar as well. Find Familiar allows you to summon a Raven Familiar, and again, part of Odin's little knowledge-seeking plan is his ravens that gather info and report back to him. With this, we kind of get our own little raven who can acquire information for us. It's roleplay, but come on, it's accurate roleplay, surprisingly accurate. Now, as for the more kind of useful utility options, of course we're grabbing Shield, giving us a bump to our armor class, as well as being able to grab Enhanced Leap, Long Strider, and Feather Fall. We get to prepare 3 of these spells, and I'm going to keep the spells that the game has already selected for us. Next up, we get to choose our subclass, and you guys already know where I'm going with this. I mean, come on. Odin is giving this guy the same knowledge he saw in a prophecy that showed him everything. So we're going with Divination. Although I'm not flavouring this as directly being able to see into the future, our vast knowledge of so many different potential outcomes, and just the various knowledge that we would gain from Odin's blessings would basically allow us to almost predict things before they would happen without actually seeing the future. Being able to read our opponent's moves, being able to see patterns in certain events, predict how things will go based on the past, stuff like that. Divination is going to allow us to basically turn this kind of flavouring into gameplay with the ability Portent. Portent is going to allow us, after each long rest, we gain 2 random Portent dice. Basically, we roll these 2 die and we look at the results. Anytime we like, we can change the result of an attack roll or saving throw rolled near us to one of those die. So for those of you who don't know how this works, say for example I roll my 2 Portent die at the end of the day and I get a 2 and an 18. I go to attack an enemy later on and I miss their AC of like 15 with like a roll of 13. If I use my Portent die and use my 18, I can change the attack roll to that and hit. Same with saving throws. If an enemy tries to hit me with a fireball and I fail the dex save, I can instead increase that to 18 or something like that, or I could lower my enemy's saving throw to a 2. That's how Portent works. Only getting 2 once per long rest kinda sucks, but it is still a very powerful ability, and we'll get more ways to kind of manipulate fate as we go. I mean, Shield also kind of works for that as well, in some way. Speaking of spells, we are going to get a couple of more, and I quite like picking up Magic Missile here, because even though it doesn't matter what our intelligence is, this is still a good, decent DPS spell to have. And finally, your last spell can be whatever you like. It's not really going to matter too much. Mage Armour is kind of useless to us because we already have Monks on Armoured Defense. That would be the only other utility option I would kind of consider. So maybe something like False Life to gain temporary hit points could work, but honestly, it's up to you. Whatever you think might work. Now, we're not going to be going to Wizard level 3, in fact now we're going to be going back to Cleric, and we're pretty much going to be staying there. Cleric, all the way up to level 9, has features that I want to grab, specifically War Cleric features. Now, let's get into it. With War Cleric, we're going to gain Channel Divinity charges, and now as well we gain our Guided Strike Channel Divinity ability, which allows us to add a +10 bonus to our attack roll, again, using our knowledge to kind of change the outcome of our attack rolls. That's kind of the running theme here. You'll see where I'm going with it. As for our prepared spells, as a Cleric, we do get access to quite a few. Now, there's a specific little tidbit that I found really interesting in Odin's kind of biography on the Forgotten Realms. Forgotten Realms. I always do that. Forgotten Realms wiki. If he casts a healing spell, he gets to go to sleep for a few days. Like, if he uses his godly abilities to heal another person, he is put into a coma. So I actually don't think this character would go for healing spells, so let's look at what else is available to us. Sanctuary, one of the best spells in the game, I don't even need to explain it. Guiding Bolt, a really decent radiant damage ranged attack. Inflict Wounds, a close range necrotic damage attack, which I really like. Command, that just feels right. And Bless. One of Odin's abilities in the Forgotten Realms lore is the ability to make their allies basically go into a berserker rage, basically turning all of his allies into barbarians who can rage. So, we could maybe team this guy up with a party of barbarians, use Bless on the barbarians, and that like triggers their rage or something. I don't know. Feel free to play around with it. It's a fun idea. Next up, at Cleric level 3, we are going to get access to level 2 spells as well as our level 2 domain spells. Magic Weapon is fine, but it's not something we're going to want to concentrate on. However, Spiritual Weapon is really fun, especially thematically for this build, because you can use it to summon a spiritual spear. Now imagine this character calling on Odin's power to summon a spiritual aspect of Odin's spear. We get up to level 6 spell slots with this build, so you can summon a level 6 spiritual weapon spear to fight alongside you. That just feels awesome for a Chosen of Odin, so I'm really glad that this gets packed in for free. As well as we do get to pick a level 2 spell, and if you paid attention at the start of the video, you already know what I'm going to pick. Hold Person. One of the main abilities listed on the Forgotten Realm wiki for Odin is his ability to paralyze enemies with his gaze. So getting both Hold Person and Hold Monster on this build, as we will be able to get Hold Monster as a Cleric with War Cleric, felt perfect. So I really wanted to pick these up, and when I found out I could get both from Cleric, I knew what I had to do. Next up at level 4, we're going to get, Cleric level 4 I should say, we're going to get access to another cantrip, which I'll just pick Sacred Flame. As well as an extra spell, I'm going to pick Aid. Again, I know I just said the whole healing thing doesn't really apply, but I think Aid is still just too strong to ignore. I may also even throw in Blindness, because, I mean, Odin lost an eye. Blindness. It's kind of ironic. Okay, maybe not. We'll keep less. Next up for our feats. Now, definitely at this point you want to take an ability score improvement. I would say maybe you want to get to at least level 4 of Cleric, maybe before taking the Wizard multiclass dip, just because otherwise you are going to be sitting at a 16 for your spellcasting modifier for a long time, so maybe go with that. But I'm going to bump up my Wisdom now. We'll check out the potential feats later. Next up, at Cleric level 5, we're going to get access to level 3 spells, including the fact that we get Spirit Guardians, one of the best Cleric spells in the game, and Crusader's Mantle for free. Crusader's Mantle, in fact, may even work better for that, like, buffing up your allies kind of thing. It would make more sense maybe than Bless, just adding radiant damage to all of their attacks. So yeah, that seems like it would be more appropriate to me. So definitely want to use that as kind of like Odin's war cry, or whatever we want to call it. The Spirit Guardians is just absolutely amazing as well. I like the fact that this build can be an offensive threat, a utility caster, or a team player. I think this build has a lot going for it, actually. And as I said, we do gain access to level 3 spells. And since Odin does have, like, wizard capabilities, I think grabbing Glyph of Warding to have kind of like an elemental attack does make sense. So I'm going to pick it up here. As for, I think I will grab Blindness, because I think it's something I don't actually take enough on my builds, and it's actually a pretty decent spell overall. Next up, at level 6, we are going to gain another charge of Channel Divinity, meaning we can use our Guided Strike more often, as well as now we have the ability to grant that plus 10 bonus to attack rolls to our allies as well, giving us even more ways to manipulate the battlefield in our favour. So I would almost consider this guy a battlefield commander now, being able to not only manipulate things for himself, but also his allies, because Portent and all that sort of stuff does also work on your allies' rolls. So yeah, this guy has now become sort of a battlefield commander. Again, pairing this with like the Thor, Loki, and Tyr builds could make a really fun and thematic team, I'm just saying. As for another spell, it's entirely up to you what you want to pick here. Again, we've kind of run out of the most thematic options, but I do think, again, Odin build who kind of has all this knowledge and manipulation tactics will probably actually bring silence to the table to specifically deal with spellcasters, at least in my opinion. Next up, at level 7, we are going to be able to grab level 4 spells. We gain access to 2. We get Stone Skin, making it so we can basically make ourselves resistant to physical damage. I guess you could kind of flavor this as like a different way of getting Barbarian Rage, I guess. I don't know. Not really something I would probably use. But Freedom of Movement is great, allowing you to snap an ally out of stun, and making it so difficult terrain cannot slow them down, and they cannot be magically paralyzed or restrained. This basically just means that you can cast this at the start of the day, it lasts until your next long rest without concentration, and just be completely immune to a status effect, as well as being able to freely maneuver around the battlefield. And you can cast this on your whole party if you choose, which is a bit spell slot heavy. That's 4 level 4 spell slots at the least, which means you'll have to use a level 5 one as well. So maybe pick and choose who actually needs it, but it's a very, very nice buff that we get for free anyway, so it's worth having. I would also say I would probably pick out a couple of these level 4 spells. I definitely want Banishment, again that just kind of feels like it would make sense for this build, as well as Guardian of Faith, again summoning maybe like an Asgardian warrior, maybe it's like the soul of a Valkyrie or something. Could actually be really fun, so I like that thematically, so we're going to go with that. Next up at Cleric level 8, we're going to get a couple of things, including something really, really cool, Divine Strike Weapon. This is going to add an additional d8 of our weapon's damage whenever we land an attack. Now, normally this is only supposed to be once per turn, but there is actually a way to game it so you can get 2, because this, like Divine Smite, works on a reaction, and for some reason, the reaction version and the one you actually click in combat are 2 completely different resources. So if you click, instead of your main attack, you click Divine Strike, and then your reaction variant, which could be the one that you use maybe if you go with Polearm Master, or just when someone comes near you, or something like that, you can basically use it twice in a turn, which is actually pretty good. So getting that extra damage on all of our attacks kind of makes up for the lack of extra attack. But We have still been getting War Priest charges as we've been leveling up, so we're going to have a lot of extra attacks anyway, just meaning that we can deal pretty decent damage. Again, this build is more of a commander slash utility build, but it does have a ton of martial capability as well. Next up for our prepared spells, we are going to get to pick another one, and I actually do quite like Death Ward. Just cast it at the start of the day, and the next time your hit points would be reduced to 0, you remain conscious with 1 hit point left. I don't know, just makes sense. And next up, you have a choice. Like I said, you could go with Polearm Master, but I think I've kind of made the case that we don't really need it on this build. It's not going to make or break things, even though we can absolutely use it. Another ability score improvement wouldn't go amiss either. If you wanted to max out your wisdom, that could work. If you wanted more intelligence for better wizard spells, you could. If you wanted more constitution for better health and concentration, you could. However, if we really want to take this battlefield commander stuff, this kind of like manipulation of the battlefield to the maximum level, then there's nothing better than the Lucky Feat, which is my personal choice, giving us 3 luck points that recover on a long rest, that allows us to gain advantage on attack rolls, ability checks or saving throws, or make enemies reroll their attack rolls. You might think this is overkill with everything we already have, but I just absolutely love it. Again, your knowledge is so vast that you can just understand a battlefield instantly and be able to make calculated decisions, commanding your surrounding allies to dodge or attack in certain ways. In my opinion, I like this on this build. Feel free to change it out, it's not necessary to the build, but I personally used it in my testing and I found it to be very useful, so I personally quite like it. And our final level of the build is Cleric level 9, where we're getting access to 2 spells as part of our domain. Flame Strike, I was gonna take this anyway, a Divine Pillar of Fire and Radiant damage. I mean, that's just cool as shit anyway, so we want to take that. But also, we get Hold Monster as a War Cleric, like I mentioned before, meaning that now we can paralyze anything with our gaze. We've finally managed to take on a pretty decent chunk of Odin's powers, so we're able to now hold monsters as well. We do also get access to level 5 spells with this build, and I would personally take either Greater Restoration or Contagion. I don't know why, but both of these feel like they kind of work for me. I'm going to go with Contagion because I very rarely take it in my builds actually, and I think it could be quite fun for this one. And that is the build. As you can even see, we're in front of Tyr's statue here. I thought that was kind of a cool place to film. Anyways, what you're getting out of this build is a little bit of everything. You're getting skill proficiencies, or at least the ones that we can, so you can kind of do everything with the kind of balanced skill stats that we have. You have access to battlefield manipulation of all kinds through Lucky, War Guided Strike, Shield, the Portent die. You have a lot of ways of manipulating probability in your favour. You also have access to a wide array of utility spells, the Hold Person and Hold Monster being the standouts here, but also things like Crusader's Mantle. Flame Strike is just an offensive spell, but Spirit Guardians also works, and you also get all the flavor stuff like Disguise Self and Find Familiar. But I'm not done with the flavor yet. I mean, everything in this build is already... I'm hoping I've convinced you at this point that I've made a pretty decent Odin build, but I do think the equipment that I have here is going to take it to the next level, and you'll see why. So, let's get into the main attraction here, and that is the fact that we are using the Nirulna Trident. I'm always going to pronounce that wrong. Now, of course, this is a trident, not a spear, which Odin is known to use. But my problem with using a spear in Baldur's Gate 3 in general is that the only really good spears in the game are the ones you get from the Selûne questline if you either side with Selûne or Shar, and it didn't feel right to use one of those spears on this build. I've made excuses for it before, but I kind of wanted to try and do something else this time. Again, I originally went for pikes, but with the way the stats kind of needed to be on this build in order for it to be what I wanted to be, that didn't really work either. And the monk trick wasn't going to work with pikes because they are two-handed weapons, which means they cannot be monk weapons, which means they cannot use our decks. So unfortunately, tridents were kind of the only option remaining, but the Nirulna Trident is nothing to sneeze at. This weapon will return to your hand when thrown, and you cannot be forced to drop it. When thrown, this weapon creates an explosion that deals 3 to 12 thunder damage on a 6-meter blast centered on the target. Beware, this can hurt you and allies. That made sense to me. Odin is the father of Thor, so it kind of makes sense for us to get, like, thunder and lightning elements in some shape or form, but I've kind of mainly focused on the thunder aspect here. And again, is it really that far out of the realm of possibility for Odin to throw his spear at something and then have it magically return to him again, kind of like Thor's hammer? Maybe I'm thinking too much of the Marvel stuff here, but I think it personally makes sense. I know it's a bit of a stretch because it is a trident, but it's enough like a spear, even. In fact, the design almost kind of looks like the kind of Nordic artifact stuff that you would see in games like God of War Ragnarok. I mean, come on, just give me this one. It's a really fun weapon. Let me just give me this one. It also gives us a +3 bonus to our movement speed and jump distance, and equipping this weapon gives us complete immunity to falling damage. It also glows, but you can toggle that off. And it even comes with 2 unique abilities. Number 1 is Zephyr Flash, dealing a massive chunk of thunder damage, dashing through enemies and possibly inflicting them with bleeding. And then you also have Zephyr Break, which does 66 thunder damage, creates a massive gale of thundery wind that can knock enemies off balance and push them away. Like, it just feels so cool. It feels like a weapon worthy of a Norse god, so I wanted to include it here. I think it's perfect, in my personal opinion. But of course, you need a weapon for the early game, as this is an Act 3 weapon, so I've gone with the Watcher's Guide. Because it's one of the only early game spears that I felt was worth a damn that wasn't just a generic +1 spear, which you could also totally use. This is Helm's weapon that I used in the Helm Deity build. It doesn't have any additional bonuses, it's just a +0 weapon, but whenever the spear misses its target, the wielder gains an attack roll. The wielder's next attack roll against the target gains True Strike, so basically you get advantage. I feel like maybe you could flavor that as like Odin's eye, like the kind of eye of Odin, like manipulating your ability to hit. It's also something you can get within the first 5 minutes of the game, so it's an option, but really any early game weapon will work, because again, we have access to all martial weapons, so just use whatever you like. Also, Odin in the Forgotten Realms is known for using a longbow, and there's no better bow for the job than the Gaunter Mail. The Gaunter Mail can possibly inflict the Guiding Bolt effect upon hitting a target, which would just mean you have advantage on the next attack roll. It also glows as well, so we kind of have 2 glowing weapons here. It's a +3 bow, and it also gives you the ability to use Celestial Haste once per long rest, giving you 5 turns of haste, which doesn't inflict you with lethargy when it runs out. So we can become pretty much a full martial fighter, based this will give us 2 attacks per round with our action, or 2 spells, which for us can be extremely powerful. But again, Act 3 option, an early game option that I think would work would be the Jolt Shooter. Again, doesn't have any additional bonuses, it's a +0 weapon, however, whenever the wearer deals damage with this weapon, they gain lightning charges, again, kind of getting back into the Thor theming. Again, lots of in that sentence. Anyways, lightning charges will allow us to gain a +1 to attack rolls and deal an additional 1 lightning damage with each attack that we do. So that would actually immediately go up to a +2 technically to our attack and damage rolls. So technically, even though it's a +0 weapon, it can technically become a +2 after 1 attack if you think about it that way. And once you gain 5 charges, they are consumed the next time you deal damage, and you deal an additional 1d8 lightning damage. So I think it's a pretty solid early game option until you get the Gaunter Mail, in my opinion. It still feels enough on theme. Right, let's get into the rest of the equipment. First up for our helmets, we have the Hell Dusk Helm. You can see in magical and ordinary darkness to a range of 12 meters, and you cannot be blinded. Giving dark vision and an immunity to blindness on a Chosen of Odin build, again, just made sense. The All-Father sees all, and we can see a little bit less than all, but a little bit more than most. We also have a +2 bonus to saving throws against spells, which is always nice. Attacks cannot land critical hits against us, and we also gain Immolating Gaze, allowing us to sear and frighten a target with nothing but our stare. So obviously, we do the whole paralyze with our gaze thing that Odin gets using the hold person spells. However, this allows us to actually use our gaze for something, so I kind of wanted it for the flavouring, and who would not be frightened of the All-Father's wrath? I mean, it almost kind of looks like it could be like a Norse helm. No, it doesn't, but you get the point. Let's hide that again. Next up, I have the Cloak of the Weave here. This is just here to give us a +1 bonus to spell save DC and attack rolls, and also it's purely for fashion, because I wanted a cloak on this kind of build. Because again, Odin is kind of portrayed as having like I got the camera right. There we go. It's kind of portrayed as having like, you know, like armor with like a cloak, and like we don't have eye patches in this game, which sucks. But I felt this just kind of completed the look, so feel free to just put whatever you like in the slot. Next up, the Armour of Agility. This is medium armor, but you could use heavy armor if you like. This just adds our full dexterity modifier to our armor class and does not impose disadvantage on stealth checks, and also gives us +2 to saving throws. You can use whatever armor you like. Again, we have access from everything to clothing to heavy armor, so use whatever. It really doesn't matter. This is just a solid pick that, again, I just felt like it looked good with the fashion, so I went with it. And if you want another early game option that is somewhat similar to this, the 1T Scale Mail basically does all of the same stuff, but instead gives you a +1 bonus to initiative rolls and is obtainable way earlier on in the game. You might find you even prefer the look of this one if you die it properly, but you will lose a couple of points of AC if you use that. But again, you could use something like the Armour of Persistence, you could use the Adamantine sets, you can use whatever you like with this build. Just use whatever looks nice to you, and the Armour of Agility looks nice to me. As already explained earlier in the video, we are using the Gloves of Dexterity to set our Dexterity score to 18 and give us a +1 to our attack rolls. We just needed it for the build, not much else I could do. And finally, we have the Boots of Stormy Clamour. Whenever the wearer inflicts a condition upon a hostile creature, they also inflict 2 turns of Reverberation. We have the ability to inflict a lot of conditions with this build, between Spirit Guardians, the Hold Person spells, and other things like Guiding Bolt as well. Whenever we inflict a condition, we're also going to be inflicting Reverberation, so no matter what we're doing, we're still getting a little bit of that thundery vibe. Now, this next option is going to seem a bit strange, but I've gone with the Corvid token. This is where we're going to get into some more Odin lore stuff. Again, Odin had the ability to change his shape around. And, of course, Odin is also connected to ravens, so I felt like the ability to polymorph into a dire raven did make sense. And in fact, polymorphing into a dire raven may be this character's way of relaying knowledge back to Odin. Maybe he's like a secret third raven who, whenever he transforms into one, is able to maybe take like a secret like backdoor portal to Odin's domain and actually give him the knowledge in person as the raven and then fly back. It's a flavor option. Feel free to replace this with whatever you like, but you cannot deny that flavoring, that lore accuracy is on point. Speaking of flavoring and trying to be somewhat lore accurate, we've got a weird choice, but hear me out. The Crypt Lord Ring. Now, why would I go for the ring that gives us Create Undead? Odin wasn't a necromancer. Well, in the Forgotten Realms lore, Odin has a ring called Dropnir. Now, for those of you who have played God of War Ragnarok, you'll remember Dropnir as being the ring that turns into a spear that can create infinite copies of itself. Well, Odin had a ring called Dropnir that allowed him to create infinite duplicates of himself. So, with this ring, we're almost kind of getting that ability in like a corrupted, like not quite complete way. Again, we're not the true Odin, but maybe you could flavor this as rather than turning corpses into minions, you're actually just kind of creating these like horrifying false versions of yourself that fight by your side. I know it's a stretch, but I really wanted to get that kind of identity when I saw that Odin had like a special ring that could do stuff like this, and I felt like this was a fun take on the concept. Again, this guy's mind is being completely corrupted by Odin's knowledge and influence, even without really that being Odin's intention, so it may lead to some extremely fucked up places. Maybe even if, again, complete what if scenario here, maybe you could run this character as an antagonist in a tabletop campaign in which he has now gone completely off the deep end and actually thinks he is Odin and that he's seen too much and that like he's on a path of destruction or something, you know, something like that. That's kind of the vibe I was going for, that this guy has the potential to go either way. But yeah, that was kind of my thought. Maybe you could even play it as a Dark Urge. I don't know. And finally, the Ring of Flinging. We have a weapon that is really powerful when thrown with this build, so we might as well add a little bit of extra damage to our throws, but again, swap this out for whatever you like if you so desire. I also forgot to mention earlier, but if you want an early game option for the Helm, we have the Diadem of Arcane Synergy. Again, we're inflicting conditions, and so whenever we inflict a condition, we get to add our spellcasting modifier to the damage of our weapon attacks. Synergizes quite nicely. Overall, yeah, I believe that is the build. As a quick side note, all of this armor is colored with black and azure dye, with the exception of the gloves and boots being colored with muddy red. But yeah, that's the build. Overall, I'm quite happy with how it turned out. I was surprised at actually how much I felt like the flavoring and like the deep lore stuff actually managed to come into the build. Again, I feel like I was surprised at how well War Cleric actually worked for this concept, so overall, I'm really, really proud of it. I'm really happy with how it turned out, and I hope you guys enjoy using it, because, well, it's not the strongest build I've ever made. I do think it is fairly solid, and like I said, I have now completed the, I guess, kind of 4 popular Asgardians, so feel free to run this as a full party build with those other builds. I think it could be quite fun, but yeah, I don't think there's actually much else to say. Since this video came about from a lack of a recent deity build stream, I will be trying to do another one soon. I'm going to be a bit busy on Saturday. I might be able to do it slightly later, but I don't think I can give an exact time as to when stream will start, so keep an eye on the channel. If you're a member of the Discord, you'll be notified immediately when I go live, so keep an eye out for that. I'm thinking it'll be sometime after 3 PM, and it will be a shorter stream, but to knock out 1 or 2 deity builds shouldn't be too much of an issue. And in fact, on that topic, I am going to be slightly more busy on the weekends now. Hopefully my Saturdays will free up a bit more, but kind of every other Saturday, I'm going to be a bit busy because I'm going to be doing, you know what, I'm doing some personal stuff. I'm taking a slight step back from being a content creator 100% of the time to just kind of do more things for myself. So I'm going to keep streams as frequent and, you know, on schedule as I can, but every other week or so it might be that we do a slightly shorter stream, or a stream that happens at a different time of day. Maybe it happens in the evening or earlier in the morning. I don't know, it'll depend. I mean, I know everyone's time zones are all over the place. I know most of my viewers are American, so I'd like to keep it in the later times of the day if I can, so that you guys don't have to wake up at like 4 or 5 in the morning just to watch my streams, which I hope none of you actually do, because I would feel incredibly guilty. So yeah, well, I'm planning, but then again, in, like I say, about 6 weeks or so, I'm going to be in summer holidays, which means I will have 6 weeks to do pretty much nothing but stream. So any streams that I do end up missing here or there are going to be made up for tenfold. There's going to be the Pokemon Trainer streams, there's going to be build streams, and I mean just generic build streams. Like, you guys give me your requests live on stream, and I just kind of come up with them. We're going to be doing more Pathfinder streams, because I'm seeing that a lot of people from the Pathfinder community have started to find their way to this channel from that last stream I did, so I really want to continue that, because Pathfinder is absolutely a system I want to explore. And I will give you guys a quick update on the status of some of the kind of extra series that I was working on. Like character creation, world builder, and all that sort of thing. Character creation is being put slightly on the back burner, simply because I need to learn more about other systems, because the whole point of that series is that I create these characters that you can use in multiple systems, so I want to learn a few more, like Pathfinder. But as for the world builder series, that is going to be coming out around the summer time, because I actually, again, the world builders thing is going to be done on live streams, so I want to have a massive series of live streams done before I actually start creating episodes on that. And then as for other things that I talked about, like things like Fusion, again, this was all in a channel update from a few weeks ago. Again, those are kind of being put on the back burner because, again, I just don't have the time. A lot of these other videos actually require a lot more time and effort on my part to be able to get them done, and I just don't have the time at the moment. As you know, I made that update video before, well, if you're on the Discord, you would know, a very significant event happened in my personal life, and I'm still trying to organise things around that, but things are finally starting to settle down. But like I said, if you don't know what that was about, I put a post about it on the Discord if you absolutely must know, but in reality, it's not anything you guys really need to worry about. So, but yeah, I'm trying to get everything organised. Again, summer will be when the content really starts to break out. And in fact, I'm hoping that, because, I mean, we're in kind of the final stretch now, not quite, but we're getting very close to 10k. We're about under 1,100 subscribers away, which means we're already in that kind of, we're starting to near that, like, 1,000 and less kind of, like, final stretch. I mean, and I think if I do enough live streams over the summer and make enough decent videos and start expanding a bit more, I think we can do it. The only thing I might do is at the end of this month, I might take a short break from content creation if I can't get enough videos done ahead of time. And I'm not even going to lie, it's to play the Elden Ring DLC. I really want to do that as like my own personal thing on my own time, but maybe you'll see some Elden Ring videos come out after I finish the DLC. Who knows? But yes, I think I've rambled on way longer than I intended to at the end of this video. My apologies, but I did kind of want to give you guys a kind of general update. But yeah, that is going to do it for me. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.